Banks spent decades trapping black families in a cycle of debt. Yet in the 1960s, thousands of black men paid for every car, home, and appliance with cash, shutting the door on creditors entirely. Their secret was a code passed down through generations, forged in the shadow of sharecropping and redlining. Why did this proud discipline flourish precisely where American banking wanted it gone, and what did it cost to keep? The roots of resistance run deeper than you think. Sharecropping defined the economic reality for countless black families after the Civil War. On paper, it offered a chance at independence, but in practice, it chained generations to land they could never own. Landowners set prices for seed and tools, kept the only ledgers, and charged interest so steep that a good harvest meant little. At the end of each season, families learned they owed more than they had earned. Debts piled up year after year with no escape. The law backed the landlords, and violence enforced the rules. For many, freedom meant trading one master for another. This time, the master was debt. Decades later, federal policy drew new boundaries. In the 1930s, the Homeowners Loan Corporation created maps that colored black neighborhoods in red, labeling them too risky for investment. Banks followed the lines. Mortgages, business loans, and even basic checking accounts were denied to anyone living inside the red zones. The GI Bill, celebrated for building the white middle class, offered little to black veterans. Only 2 out of more than 3,000 VA-backed home loans in Mississippi in 1947 went to black applicants. In cities across America, home ownership became a distant dream. By 1960, just 38% of black families owned their homes, compared to 64% of white families. The price of a loan, if one could be found, often came with higher rates, more fees, and the constant threat of repossession. These policies did more than block access to credit. They taught that borrowing from banks could mean losing everything. Wages could be garnished for a missed payment. A single late bill could bring public shame or eviction. Families learned to distrust official promises and to see debt as a danger, not a tool. The lesson passed from parent to child. When you owe, you are not free. Cash became the shield. Every dollar seed was a step away from the trap. In the shadow of these systems, a code of self-reliance grew, not out of myth, but out of necessity. The discipline to avoid debt was not just pride, it was protection against a world built to profit from black hardship. A father stands at the counter, bills stacked in his hand, eyes steady as the salesman counts every dollar. No loan paperwork, no interest rates, just the slow, deliberate handoff of hard-earned cash. In kitchens across the country, this scene played out for refrigerators, washing machines, even used cars, anything big enough to threaten the family's security if it came with a monthly bill. The ritual was the same, months, sometimes years, of saving, each payday bringing the goal closer. The cash might be hidden in a coffee can, tucked behind flour in the pantry, or slipped beneath a loose floorboard. On the day of the purchase, children watched as fathers smoothed out creased bills that had passed through too many hands to count. Each dollar carried the weight of sacrifice, a skipped treat, an extra shift, a winter coat handed down one more season. Ownership meant more than pride. It meant safety. A car paid in full could not be repossessed after a missed payment. A refrigerator bought outright kept food cold, no matter what happened at work. The family's roof stayed over their heads because there was no mortgage for a bank to call in. The lesson was clear. If you could not pay cash, you waited. Debt was not just a number. It was a risk, a lever someone else could pull to take away what you had built. Stories passed down in living rooms and on front porches told of neighbors who lost everything over a single missed payment. The warning was woven into every decision. Don't owe nobody. Fathers taught sons to count their bills twice, to demand a receipt, to walk away from any deal that required a signature promising money not yet earned. Even the smallest purchases came with a sense of ceremony. The act of paying in cash was a declaration no bank, no landlord, no creditor could claim a piece of what was yours. The discipline ran deep. No matter how tempting the new model or the salesman's pitch, the answer stayed the same: cash on the barrel or nothing at all. This was not stubbornness for its own sake. It was protection, passed down from men who had seen what happened when debt crept in. The pride in ownership was quiet, but fierce. Each paid-off possession was proof that freedom could be claimed, $1 at a time. Every household had its own system, but the kitchen drawer was sacred. Inside, envelopes lined up like soldiers, each one marked in careful handwriting: rent, groceries, light bill, church, a little for savings. On payday, Mother sat at the table with stacks of cash, counting out each dollar by hand. No calculators, no bank statements, just memory and discipline. The ritual never changed. She would break the bills, fold them once, and slip them into their envelopes. If the grocery envelope ran low, meals got simpler. If the rent envelope was full, a sigh of relief might escape, but never a celebration. Money for treats or new shoes waited until every envelope had what it needed. Children learned early not to touch those envelopes. The lesson was clear: each dollar had a job, and every job had to get done before anyone could think about extras. Sometimes a few bills got tucked away in a spot only she knew, behind a jar of beans, under the lining of her purse, inside a book no one would open. That was emergency money. It was not for spending. It was for when the heater broke, or the landlord came around 2 days early, or a cousin needed bus fare home. Neighbors swapped stories about the best hiding spots, but the method was always the same. Never let money slip through your fingers. Never let a bill go unpaid. If an envelope emptied before the next payday, the answer was simple: you waited. No borrowing, no pleading with the store for credit. Credit was a trap, and mothers knew it. The empty envelope was a warning, not an invitation to spend what you did not have. This was more than thrift. It was a code. The envelopes kept the family safe, 1 week at a time. A new coat or a Sunday roast came only after the rent and lights were covered. The rules were strict, but they kept the wolves from the door. Children grew up watching, learning that every purchase was planned, every expense measured. The kitchen drawer, with its stack of envelopes, was the real bank, the only one that could be trusted. The layaway counter at the local department store was a familiar stop for families who refused to risk what little they had on credit. At Sears or JCPenney, a mother might place a winter coat or a child's bicycle behind the counter in August, leaving a few dollars each week until the final payment set it free. There was no interest, no paperwork, and no fear of a missed payment turning into a crisis. Clerks recognized regulars by name, sometimes calling out when a new shipment arrived or a sale was coming up. Each payment was recorded in a logbook, a quiet tally of patience and discipline. The item stayed locked away untouched until every dollar was paid. Then, and only then, did it belong to the family. Around the holidays, banks and savings clubs ran ads for Christmas clubs, inviting customers to deposit a little each week. By December, the bank handed back the total in cash, ready for gifts or a special meal. There was no temptation to borrow or run up a tab. The Christmas Club passbook, stamped with each deposit, became a small badge of pride. It was proof that waiting brought its own reward, that a holiday could be joyful without a single cent owed. For families who remembered the shame and danger of borrowing from landlords or store owners, these systems offered something rare: control. Layaway and savings clubs worked because they fit the rhythm of working life, the steady grind of paydays, the slow build toward a goal. There was comfort in knowing that the new dress or the toy train would come home only when it was truly paid for. Children learned the lesson early. Good things were worth waiting for, and nothing was more satisfying than carrying home a package that belonged to you outright. Even as department stores began to push credit cards and instant approval, many families held on to these habits. The layaway counter stayed busy through the 1960s, a quiet rebellion against the lure of easy debt. In the end, Every purchase was a small victory, earned, not owed. In back rooms and kitchens across black neighborhoods, the susu was as steady as the ticking of a clock. 10 neighbors, each with a folded bill, gathered around a table. No paperwork, just trust. Every week, each person contributed the same amount, and one member took home the pot. The next week, it was someone else's turn. The cycle continued until every hand had received a share. If a payment was missed, word traveled fast. The consequences weren't legal, but personal. A lost place in the circle, a loss of respect. In cities like Detroit and New York, these rotating savings clubs, rooted in West African tradition, helped families buy appliances, cover hospital bills, or send a child to college, all without a bank's permission. Barter wove another safety net. A mechanic traded a brake job for a basket of tomatoes. A seamstress hemmed pants for a sack of potatoes. Skills moved through the neighborhood as quietly as cash, and every exchange kept money close. Repairs stretched the life of radios, shoes, and washing machines. Nothing was wasted. A broken toaster found its way to the neighbor with a soldering iron and a knack for coaxing life from tired wires. Oral histories recall how these trades built a web of support, sidestepping the need for credit and keeping families afloat. Churches anchored these networks. Sunday offerings funded more than sermons. They paid for groceries, rent, or a few dollars slipped into a father's hand after service. The help came quietly, with the understanding that one day the favor would be returned. Sermons warned that debt was a shackle, not just a number. The church's aid was both spiritual and practical, reinforcing the lesson that freedom meant living within your means. Insurance agents from North Carolina Mutual and Atlanta Life walked door to door collecting dimes and debit books. These small premiums bought peace of mind, a dignified funeral, a cushion for hard times. The agent knew every family by name. Miss a payment, and the agent returned, not with threats, but with concern. Accountability ran both ways. Each system, susu, barter, church, insurance, rested on a single rule: take care of your own. Pride in these arrangements ran deep, proof that even when banks shut their doors, black families could build wealth, protect each other, and remain free from debt. Credit offers began arriving in mailboxes, thick envelopes promising instant approval, and a line of credit with no questions asked. The language was slick: buy now, pay later, no money down, just sign and take it home. Department stores and national banks, locked out of black neighborhoods for decades, now saw a new market. They sent out applications by the thousands, sometimes addressed to resident or occupant, hoping to catch anyone willing to bite. The numbers looked tempting: a bank AmeriCard with a $500 limit, a Sears card for new appliances, a department store line for back-to-school clothes. But the fine print told a different story. Interest rates hovered at 18%, sometimes higher. Annual fees chipped away at any savings. Miss a payment, and penalties stacked up fast. Late fees, higher rates, even threats of wage garnishment. Newspaper ads and radio jingles painted credit as a ticket to the American dream. In reality, the terms were designed to keep balances growing. A $200 refrigerator bought on credit could cost $350 by the time it was paid off. Department stores trained clerks to pitch store cards at the register, offering discounts on the first purchase but locking families into revolving debt. Some banks used out-of-state charters to sidestep local usury laws, importing higher Nebraska or South Dakota rates into cities like Detroit and Chicago. Letters arrived every week, each one promising a better life, each one a trap disguised as opportunity. The pressure was relentless. For families who had learned to save every dollar, the flood of offers felt like an attack on their discipline. The old code, wait, save, own, met a new world where patience was out of style and debt was sold as freedom. The first cracks appeared when neighbors started showing off new furniture or cars bought on credit, the price hidden behind a monthly bill. Banks called it progress. For many, it was the beginning of a new kind of risk. The old rules began to slip away in the late 1960s. Factories that once offered steady paychecks shuttered their doors, leaving entire neighborhoods without work. In Detroit, Chicago, Newark, and Watts, unrest swept through the streets. Businesses boarded up windows or left town altogether, taking jobs and stability with them. The corner stores that once offered layaway stopped offering the service, shifting to cash or credit-only policies as insurance costs soared and profit margins shrank. Families who had always relied on cash found their budget stretched thin by rising prices and shrinking incomes. Savings, hidden in coffee cans and envelopes, vanished quickly when paychecks stopped coming. The Susu circles, once tight and reliable, struggled as members lost jobs or moved away. Even the church, a last line of defense, faced dwindling offerings as more families needed help than could give. The safety nets that had protected generations began to fray. Some men took on odd jobs or hustled for cash, but the steady grind that had made saving possible was gone. The discipline that had kept debt at bay became harder to sustain when every dollar was needed just to get by. Temptation grew as neighbors, desperate to replace what was lost, began to accept the credit cards and easy loans that filled mailboxes. The old warnings, never owe, never sign, faded under the weight of layoffs and closed factories. What had once been a badge of pride, living debt-free, felt less like a choice and more like a memory. The habits of patience and self-restraint, passed down for decades, were tested by forces no envelope system could hold back. In the space left by lost jobs and broken trust, debt began to creep in, quiet at first, then all at once. Today, consumer debt in Black communities stands at record highs, while payday lenders crowd out old systems of mutual aid. The strategies once born of necessity now hold a blueprint for financial resilience, especially as predatory credit adapts with every decade. The question isn't whether those cash-based codes still matter. The question is, who has the power to remember and who profits if we forget? Let your thoughts spark the conversation.